of you who don't know, I was originally from Hong Kong, and if you were in Hong Kong during COVID, during 2019, we first had the protests, which were extraordinarily disruptive. It was my senior year. It was supposed to be like hot girl summer. You're in school. Did not happen. My sister and I went to visit our grandparents over Chinese New Year on January 23rd. And my dad was like, you should like wear a mask. I think there's like something coming, blah, blah, blah. That was my last day of school, literally ever. And during this time, we were in Florida for a little bit, then came to Canada, and then March 13th hit. That was it for everyone. We were all in lockdown one way or another. And very quickly, I felt super disconnected by people, and I wanted to bring people together. So I started hosting these super, super, super cringy virtual events. I mean, yoga classes. I don't do yoga. Chinese speaking practice, political conversations, like whatever I could do. And I told my best friends, I was like, join, like bring a friend, da-da-da. And we had people from around the world join. Soon enough, I was very much in this like fake it till you make it. I was like, yeah, like it's a platform with like all these different events and people join. I was hosting like 12 events per day. I had like 9 different personalities. I was like Ali, but Alexandra in one, but Alex, so it looked like it was like different people. It was all me. But eventually I started to get some people to actually host and attend them, and was able to grow to around 30,000 people attending and hosting these virtual events during COVID. And then we kind of hopped on the class of 2024 bandwagon as students got into university. No one could visit campus, no one could see anything. So I was like, oh, why don't you host, for example, for my class of 2024 Stanford on the thing? Why don't you host NYU class 24 on this? So we had like hundreds and thousands of students coming on for that. And that really did stem from the idea of like feeling super disconnected from COVID and wanting to just do more than just go on a Zoom call. It provided this like medium of structure. Like we're talking about politics today. We're doing Japanese speaking practice. We're doing like activism in art, like whatever that was. So that was definitely the most foundational like experience in building something for me.
Cool, I can take the next one. So for mine, I would say this WebSC is probably like my first official like paperwork and the government knows about it kind of company. But I would say that my very first company was actually in elementary school. I used to make like bracelets and sell them to my friends at school, and the school found out and they kicked me out. They called me into the office and they're like, you can't sell things in school. And so I took that as I could sell things outside of school, so that I moved to the playground. And then they kicked me out again, and they said you can't sell things like during school hours. And so I sold them before and after school. And so they kept finding ways to like push me out. But I would say that's where my first quote unquote business was. But there have been a few little jobs along the way. Like I started a kind of a writing collective for freelance writers that kind of gathered a bunch of freelance writers that I'd met in like the course of my life, and then we would like give our services to people who wanted good freelance writers that were maybe a little bit more high quality than some of the general platforms that you might have and so on. But yeah, WebSC has been certainly the most official company as of late.
Man, I feel like everybody's so cool here. My first business started, so when I was in high school, I had zero idea of becoming a business person at all. I always wanted to be an artist. And then my best friend in high school at the time was like, hey, like this thing, like you want to try building a business? And I was like, okay. And then we started everything. I think it was in grade 11. We tried everything from doing a landscape business. So like we'd go to random realtors and be like, hey, we'll clean up your yard and like we'll make it super presentable, to like knocking on doors of small restaurants and being like, hey, like let us use Weebly.com back at the time, and then let us make you like websites for like $500,000. And so we did that for a while, and then that naturally turned into doing social media for like small businesses. So like taking care of their Google, Yelp, social media, digital content, their paid media strategy, and like local influencers from like small to medium-sized local business level. And that was kind of the first real official business that we started. It was called Instant Media, and we basically, like without the fancy jargon, all of it, we just helped small businesses manage their socials. And I think we grew that to I think the first year we did like 60K. We're splitting that cash, and so at the end of the day, you're barely covering your cost of living and stuff like that. But then we ended up getting into a healthy spot where we can basically do it full time. And so I did that for about I think 3 years before transitioning into Joybox. So that was kind of my first dive into business.
All three of these stories, sound amazing. So all of you went with kind of the not exactly the traditional route of working for a company, but rather you started your own, right? So what was kind of the spark? What was the moment where you realized, I want to build something for myself rather than join, someone else's company? Micah, we can get started with you.
Yeah, I can start. So I actually did work for another company. I worked for Microsoft basically right after college. So I did have that experience of working for a big company, but all of my college internships were at startups. So I really got to experience what a startup is like very early on, like seed stage,
Yes,
almost Series A companies. And so working with the
Okay,
founders,
we need
realized
a
I
great
kind of
slide.
thriving through
Thing is the Young Innovator Award.
What was that?
We need we'll be right back for the Young Innovators Award.
Okay, perfect.
We need a
I'll put that
slide.
in now. Perfect.
So if you could update that and then let me know, I'll refresh my end.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
freedoms came to light when I was working at Microsoft. Things like these big corporate rules that you have to follow. So, for example, it was during COVID, right? So people were remote. There's no way for people to really know where you were unless they looked it up. And so I went to Costa Rica for like 1 week. And this is during training and stuff where you're just sitting in lectures basically for 8 hours a day. So there was no reason why it would be a problem. But then after someone found out that I was there, and then it did become a problem. So I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Like I'm here for a couple of days, no one needs to know. And anyways, that was another qualm I had. But clearly, like I decided to start my company because it was a huge problem area that I was super passionate about. But along the many years of working and being in companies and stuff, sorry, I'm on a busy street, kind of just discovered that company is what I want to do.
Yeah, I'll take the next one. So sort of similar to Micah, in high school as well, I was also working at startups, and honestly, I couldn't recommend this for anyone else. Both if you're working or planning to go into something more traditional like IB or consulting, or you want to start your own business, you learn so much, because on one end, let's say you want to be a founder, there's no better way to learn how to be a founder than that startup. And then on the other hand, as Micah points out, like it feels like at a big organization, you don't have a lot of impact. But in a smaller startup, you're probably not going to get paid a 16-year-old anyway, so you might as well do it in a place where you can like network really well, really find that you got an impact of a project. So yeah, I was working at a couple different startups remotely during high school, did some in-person stuff. Last year I was in Shanghai, I was working at Alibaba as well, which is a huge company. So I do think there is a value and balance between starting your own thing, but also working and learning from the best. So I wouldn't say one is good and one is bad. It's more like different stage in your life and like what you can learn at those different times.
I guess for me, I took a really untraditional route. Like I dropped out of college twice. First time I didn't even go after putting in my campus deposit. And then my mom asked me like, hey, like I grew up in a single family household. So it's like when you ask, why did you jump into entrepreneurship? I just couldn't see myself taking out a shit ton of student loans and then going to school and then paying that back through like a low stuff. Like it was the timeline and the horizon for what I wanted was too long. Like if I wanted to spoil my mom and do something for her to take care of her later in the future, like we'll have to wait until I'm like 28 or 30 to do that while I'm being crushed by my own student loans and not being guaranteed a job specifically even graduating straight out of high school. And so that's why I started entrepreneurship. I was like, you know what? The 4 years that I spent at school, I want to take 4 years betting on myself. And so when I first dropped out of school, my mom was like, I have a Korean mom. The expectation is to go to school, go to Google, and go to Amazon, become an engineer. I'm terrible at math. I'm terrible at all those things, so that didn't work out. And so when I first told her that I didn't want to go to school, she freaked out. And so I took a year trying to build businesses during that time, and then I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea how to, maintain clients, how to actually pay off my rent and my basic transit fees and my food and my daily spending. And so I picked up 2 jobs, did online schooling, and then went back to school for a semester and a half. And then during that time, I built another business on the side, and that ended up letting me go full time, which kind of made it like a really half pregnant situation because I didn't know what I was doing. And so I think throughout that process, what I learned was that, I didn't go work at a startup. I honestly just, as stupid as it sounds, I gained a lot of experience just putting my back against the wall and trying to figure out how to make rent every month and getting extremely creative. And so I'd pick up the most odd jobs. I'd be like designing websites for the most random of services ever, from like realtors, trainers to like sex consultants. It was like the weirdest space I've ever been in my whole entire life. And then that naturally spun into doing LinkedIn for rappers and executives and stuff like that, getting paid like $500 to review their LinkedIn. And so in terms of what I learned the most was continuously just figuring out what is the value that I can provide and doing it for free. And then continuously figuring out how can I do this over and over again and get people to pay me. And so I honestly spent, like, I think the first 2 to 3 years, especially after dropping out, just touching so many different things in the lens of social and digital throughout multiple different types of businesses. And I think through the practice of just trying and learning, trying, failing, I kind of figured out what I wanted to do specifically in the realm of business and what's the type of business that I wanted to create. And so I had a lot of my learnings from just honestly like trying to run into a concrete wall 10 million times and failing.
I mean, everyone has their own approach, right? We saw just 3 approaches now, and every entrepreneur has their own story. The next step in that story, right, is always as you get started, there are obstacles that you face, right? This one kind of goes out to Micah and Alexandra. As female founders, were there any additional challenges that you felt, you had to overcome?
I can kick this off if you want. I would say in general, I've been pleasantly surprised because you hear horror stories all the time when you're like, growing up or in college about things about, being a minority founder or being a woman in tech and all these things. And sometimes you do come across stuff like that, but I would say majority of the people that I interact with are fantastic, smart, open-minded, do not treat me any differently. That being said, there have been experiences where because I'm of my gender or whatever it may be, I'm asked different questions or people just don't expect me to be technical or all of these things, right? And so those things have come up. It's hard to say whether or not it's been like it's halted any progress in the space. Maybe nowadays it's actually a benefit to have diversity as part of your background or your identity. But you just have to use what you have. And so although there have been moments where it's been like, yes, because I'm a woman, maybe someone said something else to me that they wouldn't have said to a dude. But that's just part of being who you are, and you work with when you work on the day-to-day, and most of the people every day are fantastic, so no qualms there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say for whatever background, whatever thing you have, use that to your advantage. If you're a female, get into femtech. That is so lucrative. Get into that. If you are a really nerdy guy who never talked to anyone and all you like to do is game, be that nerdy guy and get into gaming. Whatever you see is not a thing to be I'm so sorry. I never like to feel that way in any way, shape, or form, and that's not how you should feel, because then you kind of put yourself down, you feel maybe disoriented. Of course, there's things that maybe I don't even realize that are happening to me, the way I'm being treated, because I've only lived my life. I don't know what it would be to not be a girl. I love being a girl, and I've done wonderful things to unite the communities around that. But in terms of differences, I can speak even from my experience in BC this summer, there still is a huge discrepancy, particularly in some verticals around cybersecurity and infrastructure technology, where there just disproportionately are more men. That said, as Micah says, there is a huge push in diversity more now than ever, which can allow for huge opportunities that never were before. So let that serve as a huge motivation instead of a detraction by any means. Use that in the best way possible. For me, I'm studying computer engineering right now. Frankly speaking, I am the only girl in a 200-person classroom, and I'm that's awesome. So that energy is that I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, it's great to hear, a more uplifting message compared to some of the traditionally, like Micah said, horror stories that we hear from the industry, right? So talking about kind of using who you are as a strength, Sam, in your time as an advisor for the Gen-Z Foundation, and to all of you as, Gen-Z entrepreneurs yourself, what do you think are the greatest strengths of this generation?
I think our generation is super fucking dope. Sorry if I'm not allowed to swear, I apologize. I think the reason why I think it's so dope is because social and digital has changed kind of the playing field of everybody. And I guess I was on the later cusp end of Gen Z, so I'm 98, baby. I'm 24 years old now. I guess I've been in digital since I was 17, just learning how to grow organic pages on Instagram or Pinterest or LinkedIn or Twitter, these kind of things. But ultimately, what I started to realize was that when we first started social, getting people to use Instagram in the form of a business was almost impossible. When I first called a realtor for the first time ever, being hey, you should be on social, he literally said, "Who are you, kid? Get off the phone," right? And now it's so different, because it's if you're not using Instagram for your social media, if you're not using Instagram for your business growth, it's that's such a no-brainer in terms of what it's like to be in 2022. But it wasn't always this case. And what I realized that throughout my career, every jump that I've had exponentially in terms of my career, it's been through the lens of social, and I think I'm a little bit biased because I'm not an engineer, I'm a marketer by trade, and specifically in the form of content. And so I think the biggest advantage that I've been able to have to basically build a brand for myself and the businesses and the brands for our clients has been through the lens of social and being at the forefront of it all. So when you have certain people in marketing, we have such a lag because how do you learn social media? There's no university course that you can take. At least there wasn't before. I'm sure there is now. Even if it's in a curriculum now, the algorithms and the features are changing so fast that if CMOs and big brand marketers can't even keep up, how do you expect a course that's just got inducted into a program at a school for it to stay relevant and be relevant by the time you get out? And so a lot of I think the benefits that we have is that we grew up with digital technology right at our fingertips, and the ability for us to be able to use it and be a lot more familiar with it compared to our older cohorts. I think being able to use that as an advantage, but also gain those business skills to be able to match the language in between. So, hey, I understand social, but I don't understand business. So being able to team up with someone that might understand business a lot better, but then being able to bring your assets in terms of understanding of social, that's kind of where I found my fit in terms of marrying those skill sets and being able to make those leaps in terms of my career. And I think that's kind of the biggest advantage that Gen Z has. As a cohort and as a generation, I think we're so much more open to doing things. Just being able to watch, like obviously Micah and Alexandra, like just hearing your careers and how you guys have grown, it's like everybody's just picking up stuff and trying different things and reiterating and testing. And there's no boundaries in terms of what you can create, and being able to meet other like-minded people that are very similar. I think that's honestly been the biggest thing that's resonated with me, being a part of this kind of cohort.
On the same note, I would say for Gen Z, this generation is that self-starter generation. Whereas perhaps in previous generations, there was a larger barrier of entry to do something, maybe starting your own like soccer coach community, or I started an NYC blockchain book club like 2 days ago. We had like 50 people on it. Like it's so much easier to start something now than ever before. Success, okay, that can go up and down. Lots of people succeed, some people don't. But in terms of starting something, it is way, way, way easier. And to see how much more impact this generation has been able to make on like the career landscape than any other generation before. Like even nowadays, like someone who's 18 to 25 is immensely more well respected and hugely successful than I think in the previous generations, just because they can. You can learn, people love learning, people learn how to learn, which is not something you learn in school, contrary to popular belief. So yeah, I would definitely echo a lot of the sentiments that Sam just shared.
Yeah, I'll second both of you, actually. I really like what you both said. And I think the digital native part of it's super important because I think this generation is really good at picking up new concepts, and especially with new tech like Web3 and whatever's going to come after it. We're so much faster at least understanding how to use things, how to sign up for stuff, how to like navigate the new space. I think that's one. And another thing is that I'm noticing, I feel like this generation is like less willing to settle for things they don't want to do. Right, so like pursuing the things you are interested in, doing jobs and work that you want to do, and I think that creates people like Alexandra and Sam that are like going after all of the things that they want to do, which is super impressive and also really exciting because I can't wait to see what every individual person ends up doing with their their careers and paths.
Yeah, definitely. So what kind of lessons have you learned from your, various ventures that you can now apply in your everyday life, right? Beyond just in a business aspect and more as, a person?
Absolutely. Mine is simple. Every single thing happens for a reason. And even if you don't think it does, tell yourself it does because it's going to give you the confidence and the hope to get through it. Terrible things have happened, like no doubt. I'm sure everyone here has had a terrible, difficult time in your life, and I'm really sorry that would happen. But I am sure that you found a way to get through it and you use that as a point of strength to overcome that challenge. Business, it's easy. You don't get a deal, something doesn't fall through, and you get frustrated. That wasn't meant to be. It wasn't meant to be. You weren't supposed to work with that person. In terms of personal life, tragedies happen every single day, and my heart cannot go out to each and every one of you at this time, but I understand and I empathize how terrible things can be. But if you can tell yourself that this was what was meant to be in your sort of trajectory in life, you can give yourself the confidence to say that this is the optimism that's meant to be. Because truly, when something happens, you can either choose to be optimistic or pessimistic. And when you try to be pessimistic when something bad happens, that's going to put you down this like self-fulfilling negative thing. Oh, I failed this test. That means I'm a failure. That means I'm never going to go to school and I'm never going to get a job. And I'm gonna, like, you can tell yourself that. Or it's, oh my goodness, I failed this job. Yes, this was so meant to happen that I didn't do well because now I'm going to go through this like movie scene where I transform and I'm going to work so hard and it's going to have a trendy song in the background, time lapse, and make an A or whatever that may be. just tell yourself everything is going to happen for a reason, because it's going to make you feel like you're almost the main character moment and you're seeing like the before and the after. So that's my piece of advice.
Micah, you want to go?
Sure, I can go. Mine's not too exciting. I would say I probably learned one of my biggest lessons working for Cirque, actually, and that has translated to very much to like running a company and everything. For those of you who don't know, Cirque du Soleil is like an entertainment company. It's basically like a high-end circus with acrobatics, no animals. It's like humans, music, lights, all the good stuff. I think human basic needs is something that people forget about over time. Like honestly, like sleeping enough, eating well, exercising, taking care of like all of the little things that matter for you to be a human being. Because I think we get really wrapped up in all of our goals and our dreams and all the things, but you can't reach those or really function as a human being without all of those basic needs. So I've like built in systems into my life to be like, this is a non-negotiable. Like, I'm gonna sleep more than 7 hours tonight, and that's just how it's gonna be. That was probably my piece of advice, but not super exciting.
I think if I had to highlight one thing, I think that's been the main theme of my life through business, through all the good and all the terrible, is how to just have guts. Like, the more I spend time with people that are sucking at what they're doing, or they're the best in the world at what they're doing, I'm recognizing it's not the people that work the hardest that win. It's not necessarily people that are the most, like, I don't know, they have the most social clout or they have the most amount of money. It's not the people that are the smartest that win. What I'm realizing ultimately is the people that have the guts to try something that nobody's willing to try. And I think those are the type of people that I start to admire, especially in the beginning part of my career. And I try to, make decisions that would absolutely scare the living crap out of me. Hence, like, why I dropped out of college twice, and I try to put my back against the wall to really figure something out. Because in those moments, you really find out who you are and the foundational components of what you're missing as a human being, and things that you're really good at when things get hard, and things that you're really bad at when things get hard as well. And so I think being able to experience those both spectrums by having guts, I think it challenges you as an overall human being. And ultimately, your business only grows as fast as you're willing to grow. And so as we talk about investing into ourselves, like, at the end of the day, the best investment that you can make is within you. And as corny as and cheesy as that sounds, but ultimately having guts and putting yourself in terribly uncomfortable situations, I think has allowed me to be able to grow not only just within business, but more so as a human being overall.
Yeah, thank you to all three of you for that great advice. I'm sure, all the participants are going to, take that to heart and also apply it wherever they can, find an opportunity. So now we're going to move on to kind of the Q&A from our audience members, right? So this first one is, how has growing up in different countries affected your success, or I guess even your story, right? Because all three of you are from very different places, very different backgrounds. So how do you think that's kind of shaped your journey?
So I was born and raised in Japan, in Tokyo, and I also grew up in Minnesota part-time. And so that's actually been a huge part of my entire journey, not both like just culturally as like having a view of multiple different countries is one good thing, and very different countries has shown me many different stories and learnings as I've been growing up, but kind of in business too, and in college, it's given me this niche community to always find like people I can get along with, whether it's Japanese people, Japanese Americans, or people who really love Japan, all of the above. But it's also given me kind of this set of extra mentors and entrepreneurs that I can connect with on a deeper level as well. So these are either Japanese people coming to the States or going to Japan and being with entrepreneurs there. So it's kind of giving me these little circles where I can fit in, because being like half Japanese, half American, you kind of feel split between the two, but truly I think it actually just expands your world to twice as many. So both in business and personally, I would say that it's been impacting all of the above.
I love what Micah just said about instead of being half, it doubles it. I think that's so beautiful. A term similar to Micah, I was born and raised in Hong Kong, but my parents were originally from Canada. I kind of grew up in this like American international Christian school, but I was Jewish. We used to travel around. Growing up in the last 2 years, I've been living in a bunch of different places. And I would say similar to Micah, like it allows you to kind of enter a conversation at any point in someone's life, which is so, so, so cool. Regardless if you're into tech, if you're into glass making, if you're a teacher, someone always is from somewhere. And if you can find that like note of connection, nothing else matters. Even if you went to a cool Ethiopian restaurant last night, you haven't been, like, talk about that. Like, the cultural entry point is more powerful than anything else. So regardless of your own cultural background, regardless of if you've traveled to different places, regardless if you've been able to meet different people, even learning about other cultures, I think is the single most important thing with connecting people. So that, I would say, is like absolutely valuable to me, particularly around different cities. Now that we can do everything on Zoom, it doesn't really matter that you all grew up in the same place. Like, we can, it's more, we're more geographically ambivalent, and that doesn't matter so much anymore. So finding those cultural connections, I would say, is like easily the most important thing for me in my professional, personal, academic life, for sure.
I came to Canada when I was 7 from South Korea. My mom was just having a tough time in Korea, and ultimately, like, we're like, you know what? We're gonna move out of Korea. We're gonna go to Canada. And so I did one day of, like, I think grade 1 in Korea, and then I literally just dipped. And so my experience was like almost like a bit of a culture shock. Like, I didn't know I wanted to move to a different country and like lose all my friends and then have to learn a whole new language in like 6 months. And like our financial positioning, like financial status during that time was not the best. Like, I grew up in a 1-bedroom apartment, four people until I was 15. And I ended up going to school in the richest part of town with all white kids. And so it was a very cultural shock for me. And I think that's been the whole entire formative time that I think the way that I've developed the way that I have is because of that. And so I think in terms of obviously like your location and the cultures that you're surrounded by has a massive influence in terms of the type of person that you end up becoming. But for me, I think I've kind of really dived into the narrative, like the classic hustle immigrant story with like an immigrant single mom or like a hustling parent, and being able to take care of like the kids and being able to put them to school so they can go to a proper school and then they can live for once in their generation, like you can live your stable financial life. And so I decided to forego all of that and say screw that, mom. So I think in terms of the narrative of everything that's happened, I think it's been tremendously impactful in terms of obviously growing up in Canada. I would have not been able to do the same level of entrepreneurial ventures if I were in Korea, just given that entrepreneurship and innovation isn't necessarily as encouraged there. It's very, very formal in terms of you have to go to the big 5 schools and then try something, or go work at a bigger company. But especially given Canada, like the amount of encouragement and resources and clubs and different types of organizations that help push young entrepreneurs across the country, I've been able to tap into a lot of those things, and so I'm so blessed to be able to even have those opportunities in the first place to even have a swing. So I think it's been tremendously valuable.
Questions kind of off of what you just spoke about, Sam. Considering the very traditional expectations that not only you but a lot of our attendees here face, how did you navigate dealing with kind of your parents' expectations about college? And you said at first she was kind of a bit concerned, let's say, with your decisions. But how did you navigate those straits?
I don't think there is any navigating, to be honest with you guys. Like, that's the cold-hearted truth. Like, I don't want to come in here and be like, there's a perfect script or a conversation that you can have with your parents. Not really. Like, at least not for me anyways. I dropped out of school. I called the admissions to say, hey, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, are you sure? I said, not really, but yeah, let's do it. And then right after I called my sister. My sisters are older than me, so I have this saying, I grew up with 3 moms. So if one person yelled something, it would be echoed twice. So I have three really strong independent women in my life telling me no, 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 or yes, yes, yes. And so I did my round of phone calls to each of my sisters, and my first sister said, get the hell out of the house. Pack your bags. We didn't work this hard and sacrifice everything for you to drop out of school. You don't even have a plan. You're not making money. How are you going to support mom and all those things? And so for me, there was no navigating. In terms of looking back at it, I'm like, it's really insane that I did that, and I have no idea what got into my head when I decided to make that call. But ultimately, it was the one reason that I really wanted to create. I felt like I could do more in the 4 years by experimenting and trying things compared to just doing the traditional program. And I also realized, because of the outcome of going in a very untraditional route, that it can go 2 ways. You can become a person that nobody else can replicate, strategically, perspective-wise, and ultimately, I think your greatest advantage as an entrepreneur is your perspective. And by going through such a weird set of circumstances that might not be as normal, I think you provide a lot more of a unique value prop as an entrepreneur, in terms of the way that you see the world and how you build businesses. And so that was my first thesis. And the second thesis was, if I go to school, I was looking at the professors and their experiences. None of them have built a single business. And so I'm paying all this money to go listen to people talk about building businesses when they haven't built one themselves. And so the thought process is like, okay, if I could just do that, maybe I can find someone that has and learn from them. But in terms of the conversation with the parents, I don't think there's much that can change it in the first little bit outside of just continuously saying, hey, I'm going to figure this out. Just trust me. A lot of parents can have issues with trust, depending on your relationship. And I'm in no position to tell how to communicate to your parents. I just don't know them. And I have no idea the relationship that you had. But for me, I told my mom, give me a year or two and I'll figure this out. And then I think being able to show results. Hey, mom, I can pay for rent now. I don't need to borrow money from you anymore. That was the first really good step. It's like, okay, you can actually take care of yourself. You're not going to go hungry. And the second thing was, are you going to be able to start outpacing your friends and being able to actually say what you say you're going to do, and are you happy? And being able to demonstrate the fact that I was happy and also generating results, I think that was a massive game changer, especially for my mom.
Yeah, that's a really great story about, your very different path. But onto, our speakers who went with the more traditional path, right? Considering your college education and kind of the entire experience, would you say that it really is useful in the real world? Like, whether it's just the lessons you learn in the classroom or kind of the networking outside, like, where do you really find value that you're still applying, beyond campus?
I think college is what you make of it. Every college is going to be different. Every person's journey in college is going to be different. You can spend all day in classes and become a real big expert on algorithms and coding and math. That's what you want to do. You can spend all day making friends and creating connections for your lifetime. You could spend time getting to know professors and having opportunities to work for companies they're involved with, doing research and all of that, right? So every major is different. Every person's path is different. For me, I've been out of school for 2 years now, and so I would say that my biggest takeaway from going to Stanford have been the people that I've met. So not only friends, but also just network connections in industry, people who started new companies. I work part-time for someone who started a company from Stanford through my friend network, and so I won't know, kind of like Alexandra said before, everything happens for a reason, right? And I'm still discovering all of the little reasons why college was important to me and college happened. So yeah, I think, again, everyone's journey is different. I want to echo what Sam said, said it beautifully, that I can't really say what everyone's going to get out of everything, but for me, that's what it was.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The idea that you get out of it as much as you want to, you can live whatever sort of life you want. It's like saying, why would you, your entire life, you get as much as your career as you put into it. If you want to just get good grades, there's a million life hacks and little tricks you can do to just get an A. But if that's not going to prepare you for what you want to do in your life, what's the point? It's what your intentional value is. So for regardless if you're planning to go to university or not, I would set an intention of why you're going. If you're going to really become an expert in a field, you really want to research the cutting edge technology, do that. Write that down. There's so much value in writing that down is kind of being your center. So I think I did something similar when I started. I'm in my junior year right now, and I wrote down why I'm going to college, because similar, I think, to maybe many people on this call, it wasn't if I'm going to college, it's of course I'm always going to college. I never thought about not going. And I think taking a second, not to say you're not going to go, but reassure yourself why you're going. You're an adult, you're at this big inflection point in your life. Tell yourself why you're going, not because someone else is telling you, not because the school's telling you. Why are you going? I want to go because I want to learn about computer science. I want to go because I want to find the coolest professors to talk to and have coffee with them. Set a reason as to why you're going to college, and that reason is only for you and by you. I would say that's the biggest thing, and then from there you'll get whatever you want out of that mission or that general goal.
Yeah, definitely. All that really makes sense. So another question that someone had is, you started off, kind of as a lone shark, just doing your thing, right? But then at what point did you kind of realize that, hey, maybe I need to bring on other people and expand this, right? And also, how did you go about finding the right person to take that next step with? Because it's not, it's not just bringing someone on when you have 1,000 people, right? It's one other person to work with you, or 2 other people. So how do you guys go about that?
I can take this one. So the first and foremost thing is, in your heart if someone is going to be a good person. Like, that's the end of the day. Like, people are capable. You'll meet a ton of people in person. But if you feel a little apprehension before working something, like, listen to that. Listen to that thing. And this is something, or like a project I'm working on right now, but you don't realize, of course, there's wonderful people to meet out in the world. There's new people. You already have so many people in your network. Like, you don't realize the person you went to camp with, that person you did that, like, robotics project with, like, there's really great people around you in your network already. So if you're thinking of starting something, you've started something already, just start talking to people kind of in your existing circles and see what pops up. There is a benefit in close proximity, not geographically, but just people you know, even on this like event as well, like the Nexus Web3 community, like there's really cool people here. People are equally wanting to spend their Saturday afternoons to listen about Gen Z Web3 or that sort of information. Like, that is a sign. So in terms of building a team, I would definitely say having a relationship is important. As to how close you are, that is definitely case by case. But when building a team, I would say the number one thing for me is finding a co-founder. When I started Alive Vibe, the virtual events thing, I was alone, and that was super, super difficult for me to kind of have that all by myself, not able to sort of have someone to bounce ideas off of or kind of share the stress, share the highs, share the lows. So everything since then, I've always had a co-founder. I think I'm never going to go back to founding a thing again. But with that said, the first team for me is always bringing in like students and young students. Like, interns are so cool. Like, I remember being in that other place, like when I was 15, 16 years old in high school, I would have done anything. And I did do anything to like work for different companies or startups or side gigs. Like, that's cool. Everyone loves it. People love to have eager people involved. Eager people like to be involved. So I would say find a partner, like a kind of a partner in crime. And then when sort of doing like maybe marketing or engineering, that sort of stuff, definitely look for interns. People are excited and young when they are interested in something.
Yeah, totally agree on that. I always think about sayings and why sayings exist. And I would say there are a lot of sayings about working with other people. It's like, together we go far, divide and conquer, and these are all existing for a reason. I think it's really cool to, like, you know, have total control over whatever you're working on. And that can work in the early days, but if you really want to get something out there or really for something to grow and be successful and have a lot of impact, I think working it with a team is kind of a given. And for me, when I think about like who to bring on as a founding team member, as a co-founder, it's always about where are my weaknesses and where are their strengths. So like, I suck at so many different things. And so if I can find people who are really good at those things, then we're going to be a fantastic team. And so that's one big thing. And then also communication style is, I think, another thing is like, it's so easy, especially when you're working virtually, to miscommunicate. And so like someone who's able to communicate, over communicate, or just be able to be open to like honest communication is super important too. And as humans, like it takes like a little bit of time and experience to get there. And so just having that baseline of understanding between the two of you, that you know how to talk, how to work together, that's been one other important thing.
Can I have a refresher on the question? The answer's been so good that I've just been listening myself.
Sure, no problem. The question was, you know, first, how do you know it's time to bring someone else on to work with you? And second, how do you know that this is the person who you want to bring with you?
Gosh, dude. I have such a corny answer to this. Because like I think I tried all the technical things, and like as much as it happens sometimes, I'm like, so the right people just walk in your life at the right time. As much as like I want to figure out a formula to replicate that over and over again so we can hire the best people and just keep growing exponentially. But finding the right people take time, and it just takes a weird place in your life for them to walk into it almost unexpectedly. And that's been the relationships with my co-founders, the people that I've been building with that have happened so unexpectedly. It's almost like a little surprise. Hey, here's a really cool human that you can build with. And I think those are the most meaningful relationships that I've built with. Because the majority of my career, again, like, I don't know if this is very like unproductive of me. I've been building alone. I've been building a ton of time alone, like just in front of my computer, like absolutely not knowing what I wanted to do and how to do it, and just spamming YouTube and Google trying to figure it out. But now, obviously, like even though we built Joybox, so I started a company called Joybox, which we're like a content firm, and we work with different brands. We have our own pages as well, and then we were acquired actually about 8 months ago by a company called Game Monster, which is the largest gaming network on social. And so we went from like a 2 to 5 person team working with like, you know, really cool brands from rappers, musicians, and celebrities, and then being able to transition into a team that has 45 team members. And so I think in terms of when and where, like I think a lot of it comes down to what you want at the end of the day. Like, do you enjoy spending time alone and just kind of figuring out what you want to build and just testing? If that's the case, there's no harm in building alone. But if you do want to have that, like, if it's, again, like knowing your weaknesses and your strengths, because Micah said, it's like if you know that you're really good at putting ideas on paper and building out a plan, but you're terrible at executing it, then you need a person that's a get shit doneer. So go find someone that just doesn't matter what they do, they just get it done. And so figuring out your weaknesses and finding those pairings, and then finding complementary personalities, I think is going to be really important. And also watching how someone deals with like crisis and just trouble and obstacles in general, because skills and everything can be taught. A lot of it just comes down to attitude and how well you guys gel when things get hard.
Yeah, totally. And coming up to the end of our event here of this panel, one last question is, what was the most valuable piece of advice that someone else gave you that really had an impact or kind of shaped what you did, that you feel like would be helpful for everyone to know?
I see one of the questions here is, what is the best way to get mentors? And mine kind of goes along with that. Just reach out, especially as a student, especially as a young person. Just reach out to someone. You will be perplexed to see the people who respond. Reach out on LinkedIn, reach out on Twitter, reach out on Instagram, reach out on any platform you can say. Don't write an essay. No one will respond to essays. Write it under 50, 100 words. Hey, I'm Allie. I'm from New York. I think it.
going. And he was saying that you should ask yourself, what are you going to be proud of? So for some reason, that like really hit me. Like when you're thinking about any situation, like, are you going to be proud of building your company this way, or will you be more proud of maybe taking the harder route that is like, more fruitful? And so I think I'm going to take that with me moving forward. This is literally just a couple days ago, and that might be the best like piece of advice I've heard in a really long time. So, yeah, what is going to make you proud?
I love both of that. I have two. First one is like, if you're chilling on a Saturday wanting to learn about entrepreneurship and you're in high school, you're probably really freaking smart, 10 times smarter than me when I was your age or wherever. And I think one of the things that I've seen so much, especially like watching young builders, people raise millions of dollars at 21 years old. They're like this new upcoming thing. And it's so glamorized in a lot of these things. But what you don't see is what happens after that big glamour. Of like the tremendous amount of pressure of running a business, raising a lot of money, having a bunch of grown older people tell you how to run your own business, what you're doing terrible and what you're doing great.
Hey, I got kicked out of the thing. Can you tell Angela to connect me ASAP? Oh, actually, I'm in.
If you're, spending your time on a Saturday, like I
Can you
definitely
give me
didn't do this. I
host
was
real
probably like
fast? I got
doing
kicked
something
out.
stupid or, getting in trouble. Just enjoy life and make sure that you're also enjoying time with the close ones around you and just having the most amount of fun outside of just investing a lot of it into your careers. Ultimately, like the person, you just also have to be really enjoyable if you're going to build a cool business.
Yes,
Like if you're going to be a great leader. And so always invest into yourself outside of business and the type of person that you want to be. Very technical level, use social and digital to get really creative in terms of getting people's attention. And so I think one example that I did was when I first got out of school, Gary Vee was a massive influence on me in terms of like when he first came on social, I consumed all of his content and all of his keynotes. I really wanted to work for Gary. And so I created a digital resume in the form of an Instagram account. And then I actually got Gary to retweet it on his Twitter. And that ended up landing me a job interview with VaynerMedia at the time. And so I think just because of social, I did that with 3 different companies that I wanted to work with. And what I realized is that just because of digital, it opens up different ways that you can get in touch with people right at their fingertips using this piece of the device. And so just know that you have all the access in the world. It just comes down to how creative you can get, and spending time to figure out how to like make it really thoughtful. When they might receive a message from you, it's like, oh, nobody's really done that. Let me see if I want to hop on a phone call with this person. I think that would be my last advice.
Thank you guys for all that great advice and for joining us here today. That brings us to the end of our entrepreneurship panel. And so we'll see you guys back shortly for the next part of this event. And thank you again to all our speakers.
Bye, guys.
That was awesome.